Everybody. Welcome to the Founder Matcha podcast. My name is Danielle. I'm a founder's associate at Founder Matcha, and I'm here with Jake, who is a co-founder and head of growth at Founder Matcha. He is our first guest on the podcast, and I'm very excited to be interviewing him today.
Yeah, hopefully this is the first of many.
Beautiful. Thanks for being here. Over the past 5 years, Jake has built an incredible career at the intersection of startups and talent and fundraising and growth. And I'm really excited to be asking him a few questions about his career and journey because I have a lot to learn from him. And we thought it'd be a good opportunity to give knowledge and education around fundraising and business to our audience. We are at Founder Matcha growing really quickly, and we really are excited to interview some of the people that we work with over the next few weeks. So I want to ask a few questions, Jake, and I want to begin with having you tell me a little bit about your journey in the early days of your career.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it's been probably a 5, 6 year career so far. I started in university. I did finance and economics at the Uni of Aberdeen, and then I started a social media marketing company while in university. And out of all the markets to pick, we chose the conservatory market in the northwest of the UK, and because they were high ticket items. But then also the founders and CEOs tend to be very like in person, on call sales, where they would turn up to houses, knock on doors. So they didn't really have too many social media skills. And so the high ticket and then the low social media skills made it quite a good market for us to go after. And then once we had 2 or 3 clients, we ended up scaling that all the way to about 70K per month. And so I grew that business until my partner bought me out. And then I made a couple of angel investments from there into a few various companies. And then after university, I actually went into sales. I didn't go into finance, and I ended up somehow in recruitment, as many people do. And recruitment's a really interesting market because you have to, it's sales, but you have to manage both sides of the process. So you have to manage the candidates and then also the clients. And so it is actually a really, really difficult market. And the business development is pretty tough. So a couple of years in that, did pretty well. And then one of my candidates asked me to join their startup. And I had a bit of experience from obviously my own social media company, and then also from the angel investments that I did. And so it seemed like a natural fit. And so I jumped feet first.
Incredible career. And when one of your the opportunity came up to join a startup, how was that experience? What was the moment when you realized you wanted to start working in startup?
I'd always been interested and I'd always tried to follow along, but I didn't really have the knowledge when I was 18, 19 in uni to like really, really properly go into the startup world. And
Hmm.
so I'd always try to just develop it alongside my sales career. And any money that I got, I'd always be thinking kind of where am I going to put it? Does it fit in with my kind of worldview that I have at the minute? And it's a really interesting question because I didn't really have a single point in my career where I was like, right, I'm going to go straight into startups now and just go. Well, I did kind of go feet first, but then there wasn't like a light bulb moment. I was doing startups and sales at the same time for about 3 to 4 months before it got a little bit too much. And I just remember feeling just a feeling of excitement when I was leaving the sales career, very corporate, kind of on the phone, at least kind of 20 times a day, talking to candidates or clients. And then suddenly I'm put into this company where I've got so much agency, managing different parts of the company. I was in charge of the fundraising and the marketing. So I went from having a very low responsibility, and if I didn't really hit quota at the end of the month, then it didn't matter too much. But then obviously if you don't hit quota in your startup in certain ways, then the startup doesn't work out so well. So yeah, it was, and also it was my first time having kind of real hands-on kind of startup equity as well on a larger scale.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be a very exciting moment when you made that transition. And tell me, what you've been on both sides of, working with founders, exposed to them quite frequently, I assume, previously in the sales and recruiting and now obviously on the other side of the table. What's one thing founders kind of underestimate when they're building a company, or what have you learned about building a company from the perspective of being a co?
Yeah, sure. So founders, I think, overestimate exactly how much they can do. So people try and grow the company as much as they can themselves, and that bandwidth, you start by thinking that you have all the bandwidth and you can start doing products, you can start doing go to market, but as soon as you hit a certain scale, you need to bring more people in. And I feel like founders often get to the point where, especially when they're trying to fundraise and they start the fundraising journey, basically their time's going to be evaporated, and they need to bring people in quickly, and it needs to be people that understand the mission, the vision, and the value of the company. Because if you don't really have funding at that point, and you're probably low capital, so you can't really pay for like top tier top tier candidates that are traditionally on the job market. So then you need to find people that really understand the mission that you're going after. And so my one piece of advice to founders would be to build out that team as early as possible. Because then you'll probably make a lot more progress than if you try and do it yourself for a few months, a few years. You really start to get kind of bogged down, and it's not as fun. It's not as fun. So you obviously you want maybe you want a few drinks at the weekend. Maybe you want to go to events and do like small kind of company trips and stuff like that to different startup pitches. And it's much funner doing that as a team than doing it as like a one man band.
Yes. And yeah, it's almost like building the team is as important as the product because the team is going to get you from A to B and C and onwards. That's great, great, great knowledge. And would you say that's one of the common mistakes that founders make that will like determine whether they end up growing their business? Or is there something else that also kind of can contribute to no success?
Yeah, so I mean, one common mistake, this is it's relatively brutal, but you have to fire fast. I would say you need to hire fast and fire fast because kind of one bad person on the team that doesn't fit the mission and that's maybe not as involved as the other people will bring everybody else down. And so everybody on the team needs to be aligned, and that's probably the most important thing because a startup is only as good as its team, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what market you're in, doesn't matter how much funding you have. If you have a great team but then zero funding, you can make it work. But then if you've seen so many cases of companies raising fundraising, they have millions in the bank, and then the team quality just isn't there, and then the startup inevitably kind of doesn't work out. So I would say because you're going to know within 1 to 2 weeks if that person really fits in your team and is really going to do a good job.
And do you think that's kind of the problem that Founder Matcha is kind of trying to solve? You know, aligning people on mission, values, and working style. And tell me a bit about Founder Matcha as well.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Founder is matching non-technical co-founders with their technical counterparts. And the problem that we're really trying to solve is we want the early stage founders that have a dream, they have a mission, and we want to give them their kind of best chance of success over the long term, finding a co-founder or finding a technical partner. And so we really deal heavily in equity, of course. So when you're dealing with equity, it becomes more like a marriage. And with a marriage, obviously, you need to make sure that you first of all get along with the person. You need to make sure the skill set's there. But then we always say kind of mission, vision, and values. You need to align in those three things. And if you don't have those, then it's probably not going to be a good long-term partnership. Kind of 65% of startups fail because of co-founder conflicts and nothing else. So yeah, I mean we're really solving for kind of like the ideation founders. So like the angel round to pre-seed and then maybe up to seed level. At Series A, you can go and find a recruiter. You can go and use another platform that can find you a kind of 200K kind of FANG engineer. Not that they're not on our platform, but you can go and use them. But then there's not many solutions out there right now for kind of co-founder matching and for finding that first kind of technical partner, which is the most important hire you're going to make in the company, even if you do really well as well. Because if you don't make that good first hire or the good first 5 hires, then the success of the company just is not going to happen.
And you mentioned that working in equity and you know in the early stages of building, that it's kind of like a marriage. What has your experience been like in that space? Co-founding a company, you know, in the early days.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like the most important thing is that you get to the right answer as fast as possible. It's good to have a little bit of an ego, but having an ego between your co-founders and them wanting to be right is absolutely not the right way to do things. Because if something is right for the company, then it's right for you. So if you're just wanting to be right and it ends up being the wrong answer, it could cost, especially if you're fundraising, it could cost you millions potentially. So I would say definitely the number one thing is going to be just getting to the right answer as fast as possible. That could also be a product question. It could be trying to get to know your users and then trying to put the right feature in the product. And sometimes that conversation goes out of the co-founder group and you need to go and find some kind of objective views out there. Maybe you need to talk to users, and if the users have a completely different opinion to the co-founders in terms of where the product's going, in terms of what the product's trying to achieve, then maybe the co-founders are not on the way to the right answer. And so you just need to be super honed in on that because otherwise you're not going to get anywhere, right?
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, you need that bit of ego, but it's really important to be working as a team, of course.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I want to get into kind of a little bit into your brain and ask a few
Oh
questions.
no. Oh no. Okay.
No, they'll be good. Obviously, there is a level of like confidence and delusion that comes when you're trying to build something from scratch, as you have to in the startup space and any you know creative entrepreneurial venture. Are there any opinions that you kind of completely disagree with in the startup space? I've heard, you know, obviously many especially around work-life balance or even about risk taking and all sorts. Are there any opinions that you just don't agree with and that you don't think, contribute to company success?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, a really good question. Like in terms of let's call them startup myths.
Yeah, it's a
The
great,
big one
great word.
The big one is that everyone thinks they need VC funding, and the reality is that for 80%, maybe 90% of startups, you don't need VC funding. And a VC is gonna try and push you to sell within probably 5 years because they want their return, they want to return capital to their LPs, and they want a big exit. And maybe you don't want to take the business in that direction. Maybe you want to take the business a little bit slower. Maybe you don't need any funding at all. And so the majority of companies that are coming out now they are possible to be really low burn rate, where you can probably survive until you get some decent revenue. And so I would say the majority of companies that are looking for funding right now in the startup space probably don't need it. And like that's a very contrarian opinion, because if you ask a founder who's just starting out and they've not got much capital, if they can find the right people on equity and they have a low burn rate company and maybe it's a SaaS play, you can definitely scale that business without any type of VC funding. But then they'll probably spend the majority of their time trying to get funding. And so that there's many different ways to skin a cat to grow the company. And I would say that people underestimate the power of bootstrapping and how far they can go without loads and loads of funding in there. And then obviously you get to keep your equity. So I would say that's number one.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah. No, I've got a good second one. The second one would be when I would say hiring your CTO needs to be done as fast as humanly possible, because as soon as you start trying to, for example, like vibe coding now and trying to build the product yourself as a C, if you don't have a technical, if you're not starting with a technical co-founder or a CTO, you're going to put yourself 6 months behind, 12 months behind, potentially with product development, because you're trying to do it yourself and you don't have that same quality. And so I would say either start the company with a CTO, or you have an idea, come to a platform like ours, and then find it as fast as possible. Make sure it's the right fit, but then yeah, it's really important to find it quickly.
To get that traction going and that product built. And yeah, ensuring that you have that complementary skill set, of course. That makes complete sense. Back to your first contrarian belief. Do you think what you're saying essentially is that yeah, people are kind of stopping themselves before they've even started in terms of yeah, like saying that they need VC funding when they could essentially bootstrap and get some traction early on. So there's like missed opportunity there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like if it's a hardware product or like a deep tech company where you need to pay loads of money up front to make the product, then obviously that needs some funding. And VCs are usually the best person to write a big ticket. So that's a completely different case. But then the majority of software companies can usually do without.
And one last final question is what's been the most expensive lesson you've learned in your career? This could have been something that has costed you time or money or like mental capacity. Has there been any slip ups or lessons that you've learned?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a great question. Was raising for a company I won't expose anyone, but I was raising for a company that well, this is one of the first ones that I joined, where they had 500k almost committed by VC, and they lied about the active user base, and so they got all the way through to kind of signing the term sheet, and then the active user base was actually only one person, which was the CEO. But then all the time, basically, they thought it was 50%, and then they found out pretty much on the last day. And you can probably tell my reaction to that wasn't too happy. So that's definitely kind of number one. And so obviously because I'd also built the relationship with the VC, and so I knew those guys. They wanted to do the investment. Everything looked great. But then once the due diligence was done on the technical side, then it kind of all fell apart. So that's a big mistake. And then another mistake is if you're working in a normal kind of corporate job and you're always making somebody else rich, right? You're hardly ever making yourself rich unless you kind of work in high finance and maybe some other jobs, but then the majority of the time it's always the owners. So I would say always try to own what you're doing. Always try to have ownership, because then usually that comes with agency, might come with some freedom, but then whatever you're working on is your own as well.
Level of ownership. Is that something that's really important to you in your career? Is that something that kind of has driven you towards founder matcha?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I guess that's probably a key idea of we offer equity only solutions on our platform where you can hire someone based on cash or equity. And yeah, I think that's absolutely important, because I mean I used to work in recruitment. I used to have like day plans in the morning and stuff like that, which I liked my boss. I love the company that I ended up working for. Both recruitment companies. But yeah, just I maybe it was an ego thing where I couldn't take the day plans in the morning and stuff like that, and like I didn't really like too much being told what to do because I didn't believe that we were finding the right answer fast enough, and I guess that's a key part of why I became a co-founder myself. So yeah, it's probably an ego thing, but yeah, I think just having that agency in your life means, and that freedom means a lot more. I would rather be paid, kind of as Mark Cuban said, I would rather be paid 50K and work for myself than be paid 100K and work for somebody else.
Great saying. And you are a world of business wisdom as somebody who's been on both sides of, the recruiting side and now a co-founder of Founder Matcha. That's incredible. Is there any last thing you want to say or add that we've missed today?
No, no, I think it's okay. I think this is gonna be a new series of Founder Matcha where we can obviously showcase some of our amazing user base that we've got from some great companies. We've got some people that left some really big names, and then we've got some people that are kind of much more smaller company based, but their ideas are just as powerful. So I'm just yeah, I'm happy to be a part of this myself, obviously. And great job, Danielle, on the podcast. Thought it was great, and looking forward to seeing what this develops into.
Thanks for coming on, Jake. You've been an amazing first guest. There is so much wisdom in there, even stuff that I didn't even know. So it's going to be so great to share. And we're going to have some really incredible guests on the next few weeks who are going to share their, founder journeys with us. So thank you, Jake.
Perfect, Danielle. Right, see you later. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.